Thank you so much for joining us again. I am joined with writer, journalist, educator, community activist, Samuel Adams.
Let's not forget music lover.
And music lover. That is the topic of the day. Yeah. So thanks for coming back, Sam. It's always good to talk with you. And now what's nice about talking with you for a second time is that we've got that first interview where we went extensively into your background and your work. So I encourage everyone to follow or watch that video. It's on my YouTube at TSGO Prods, Prods. And so you can learn more about Sam. But before we get into today, and that allows us to have more conversation today. So Sam, why don't you give us like your elevator pitch of who you are and what you do?
So I'm an African-American male activist in the community. I'm a writer. I'm an educator. I'm a mentor. And personally, my goals are just to improve and transform the lives of those who have been neglected by society.
Nice. Okay, well put. And as per your request, we have your image up instead of the video. And today we're going to talk a little bit about African American Music Month, Music Appreciation Month, which I'll be honest, you mentioned it to me. I had no idea June was African American Music Appreciation Month. So I did a little research. I looked it up. And apparently Jimmy Carter in 1979 was the first person who decreed June as the month of Black music. So he called it Black Music Month. And then in 2009, President Barack Obama was the one who dubbed it African American Music Appreciation Month. So that's really exciting. I find it also very interesting that it happens to be the same month as New York Music Month. It feels like that completely overshadowed it because that I had heard of. I had not heard of this. And then also apparently June is Pride Month. So a lot going on with that, right?
Well, I can speak to Black Music Month. I think,
all right, so we'll start that. Yeah.
As a form of, and I think everything is, it's a form of resistance. I mean, when I hear every June, I attempt to write something about Black Music Month because music has been just an engine in regards to keeping us going in this country. Anyone who ever hears, or anytime you've ever seen us protest, and I mean Black people, march, boycott, any of that, there's always been a soundtrack. Even when we go back to enslavement, the Negro spirituals, there was information in there to help you escape the plantation. Wade in the water. When you listen to those words, it's giving you an escape plan how to get off the plantation. When you listen to Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, which is one of the most amazing pieces of music, it's protesting lynching. So music as a form of resistance has always been part of our community. And for me, in our household, in my household, my mother was rearing us on gospel music. We heard it all day long. Mahalia Jackson, Andre Crouch, the Winans, Aretha Franklin, James Cleveland. We heard these artists, Thomas Dorsey, and my father listening to pop music and jazz music. To this day, my favorite album is one my father played often as a child, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. And when you listen to that album, that is a protest album. That album is talking about the environment. It's an anti-war album. It's an album that's challenging us to get closer to God. So Black Music Month is, at its best and purest form, a month dedicated to transformation of the spirit and resisting oppression, because literally that's the foundation of the Black community.
Yeah, nice. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why I think, in my experience, Black music tends to be so moving. It's very moving. And actually, Obama's quote when he, made this proclamation in 2016, actually, he said that African-American music and musicians have helped the country to dance, to express their faith, our faith through song, to march against injustice, and to defend our country's enduring promise of freedom and opportunity for all. And I think the reason why that's relevant is because it does feel like a tool that has been inherent to the survival of the Black community. You know, being a Black person, when it has been there, you know, throughout history, it's been very dangerous to be Black, and yet we have this music which was a way of expression, and even though it was dangerous, and we can talk about that, how it started, you know, as soon as Black people started expressing themselves through music, it started getting like outlawed, right, and attached to all those laws that were saying that, oh, because people were dancing instead of going to church, and that music was supposedly unholy, which was actually the exact opposite.
Yeah, there was so specifically in the African American community, music as sacred in the church, the sacred music was seen as, you are singing for God, you are dedicating this voice, these sounds to God. But there was, even back in Africa, there was always a multi-purpose for music. But here, once we came here, there was that post-slavery, post-enslavement, I should say, time where, you know, people in church, and my grandmother being one of them, she wanted to hear holy music. But you had someone like Bessie Smith and even Thomas Dorsey, before he became, quote unquote, dedicated himself to God, the blues. And any of us who know what the blues and jazz music, those are songs, stories about our path and our journey. So you have the blues, these stories about love, these stories about pain, these stories about heartache. And then they started getting mixed with the spirituals. And Thomas Dorsey, the father of modern gospel music, who was a blues artist first, is the individual who really melded them together. The spiritual music, the sacred, and you have the blues. And then no one did it better, bringing the sacred and the secular together, than Aretha. Aretha mixed the sacred, the secular, and the sexual all in one. And, you know, you hear it when she sings her gospel music, you hear that beautiful church voice. But then when you hear her sing the Spirit in the dark, the moving of the Spirit in the dark, which is, she's not talking about the Holy Spirit, but it's still that same feeling, which is so beautiful, that singing about love and singing about God and singing about sex all became this thing that became a way we could express ourselves and vent, but also singing about what was going on in our society. I mean, Nina Simone, for women. I mean, you listen to that song and you hear about the rape, the love, the beauty of being Black, all of its colors and the challenges, and just her music in general, just attacking the institution of oppression. Mississippi Goddamn is one of my favorite songs. And first time I heard it was a child, and she's talking about how Mississippi and the Southern way of life in general was just simply trying to destroy Black people. And then you have James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. You have that. This period of time where many Black artists had their song that was like, I am going to talk about the challenges of being Black and the evils of this oppressive system. So you fast forward to present day, and especially hip hop really took that up. I mean, my favorite hip hop group to this day is still Public Enemy. My favorite album is Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. And hearing that as a teenager in my early teens was just amazing. I mean, Black Steel in the Hour, I mean, of Rage, it's just like Prophets of Rage. I mean, just their entire album is so, at the moment, it was something that was like, wow, what are they talking about? Why are they talking about these things? They're talking about the prison system. They're talking about violence. They're talking about police brutality. It was
And that was in what,
new.
70s or 80s?
That's the 80s.
Right, 80s.
80s.
Okay.
And
right.
hip hop really took up the mantle of Fight the Power, which is a PE song from Do the Right Thing. And then you know, right now when you go out and you turn on the television, one of the songs you keep hearing during these protests is Fuck the Police by NWA. I mean, that song,
right?
That song's over 30 years old,
right.
and it's still very edgy. It still has that, it gives you that feeling of power of like, this is what I want to say. This is the exact sentiment I have. And it also speaks to the fact that police brutality has been around. It's nothing new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, I do find, especially going back to like Nina Simone and a lot of those artists, Black music specifically, very transformative, and it does have this raw honesty to it. I mean, that's one of the things I appreciate about hip hop. For me, listening to hip hop is a very active experience because they are saying a lot, but they're saying it through poetry. And it's also one of the things I love about music in general is that it is another form of expression that to me is so, it engages all of the senses in many ways. You know, you can have a sense memory of where you first heard a song, and you remember, and hearing that again later can transport you back to exactly where you were and what you were seeing, what you were tasting, everything. I love music. Also, but speaking of, so we've been kind of focusing on the spiritual component. Where does somebody like Robert Johnson fit into this, who's, you know, considered like the father of jazz or blues?
Blues.
Yeah, blues. Yeah.
I mean,
father,
blues, jazz.
Not religious or different kind of religion, anyways.
Blues, jazz. I mean, it's all tied together. It's all from the same. It's from the same tree. You know, it's the expression that all of that comes from the same tree. I mean, you have Robert Johnson on guitar playing his music, but it's coming from the same tree of the gospel, of the spirituals, of the jazz, of what will become rock and roll, Chuck Berry creating all those. If you listen to the stories of the blues, if you listen to the stories in gospel music, if you listen to the stories that are in hip hop, that's the one thing that's never changed. It's these stories, the actors, the characters may have changed, but the story's still the same. Music has been a way where we can vent, praise, and share who we are. And it's the story of the journey of Black people in America.
Right.
Some people use the steel guitar. Some people use the drum. Some people use the microphone. Some people used the violin. It has been so different over time. I mean, you can listen to Coltrane or Miles and listen to the beauty of Kind of Blue or Giant Steps, and you still hear the sanctity and the sadness of who we are, and also the celebratory nature of who we are in that music. So yeah, Black Music Month is so important that I really want young people from any background to investigate, because music in America would not exist without Black folks. Period. Music in America would not exist without Black folks. And that was, for me, the danger in growing up that I'd hear outside. I would hear about, you know, once again, in my household or in my community, I would hear about these great Black artists and hear their music all the time. But when I went to school, I would only be taught about Tchaikovsky or hear about the Beatles or Elvis or Led Zeppelin, people, these groups, many of whom stole music from black people. But even what was considered classical, the music that was held as this is the highest standard, classical music, which is European, very European music, it was, someone telling me that is to be held in a higher regard than jazz, which is, as I forget her name, but jazz is America's classical music. And you listen to jazz music, it's chords, it's strings, it's the beauty of jazz music, the beauty of improvisation, the beauty of having a conversation between instruments and doing it like with just such, how it just weaves together and interconnects, and how yet we're always told that classical music is the highest standard, the highest artistic form of music. That's also a form of white supremacy. It was also a form of saying that pretty much whatever people created outside of Europe or outside of this white form of musical endeavor was not as valuable. Now, I love classical music. I mean, Aaron Copland is one of my favorite artists, but I don't put classical music from the European sense above jazz. I don't put opera above the Negro spirituals. I think all music is a form of expression of within the context of where it came from. So when people attempt to make it seem as if hip hop in some way is lesser than, which is usually what people say, because until probably my last 10, 15 years, hip hop wasn't studied in most musical schools. It was still seen as street, something on the outside, when the creation of this music came from a place where music classrooms in New York City and around the country in the late 70s were being taken away, banned, not being used. And these kids, you know what? We'll make our own sounds with our mouths. We'll beat on tables. We'll use turntables. They created music, which right now is the biggest money-making form of music in the world, pretty much with their imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah. Continue. No. What's your question?
No, we'll finish your thought, and then I'll ask the question.
Hip hop, in its form in itself, was a response. Was a resistance response to our nation saying we are not going to fund the arts programs. And these kids in the Bronx, in New York City, said, you know what? We'll fund it ourselves with our own imagination by creating our own instruments and getting these records that you've tossed out, and we'll make music like that. And look what it's spawned today. And yet we don't study that. The history of hip hop in itself is a form of resistance.
Yeah.
In its most beautiful sense of the word.
And I have to say, though, that is actually what drew me to it all along. And I don't think, I've always resisted what has been taught, right? So I've never been super interested in classical or opera. I've always rebelled against what is being told to me was good or proper. And for me, being able to, when I discovered this raw kind of emotion and this form of resistance and this new expression that comes out of, it doesn't come out of a training. It doesn't come out of education of what is music. Some of it might, but in its core, in the very beginning, these were just get downs, right? In the Bronx. I am on the New York side. I know it's in California too, but arguably it came out of the Bronx, and it was just, like you said, kids on it trying to express themselves and rebelling against what they're not, a lack of representation. And my question is about that is that one of the concerns that I explore in my book and I explore in general around the arts is if and when it does, something like hip hop actually is a perfect example, when that becomes, it does become institutionalized in that it is taught as a form of, say it's like, it's equal to classical music and opera, if you will, then my concern would be that it loses, once it's there, it loses the raw kind of emotion and innovation around it. And that's one of the, you know, growing up, everyone was always like, you don't, as a band, like the bands I knew in high school were like, well, we don't sell out. We don't want to sell out. Selling out means when you become, you know, everybody knows you and respects, not that everybody knows you, but that it basically becomes institutionalized. And so the fear with artists so often that I'm working with is that they are afraid of losing their creative edge when and if they become household names. Sometimes it's also the same fear around.
I understand that frustration, especially.
So I agree to a certain extent, but
I'm not sure I have a point other than it's a concern, and I want to know what your opinion is of that.
I think it's very important that the history of hip hop is written down and is shared and passed on, because then you get individuals like certain artists who come in and culturally appropriate without understanding what the music means to this community, what the hip hop art means, what hip hop as a culture means. So I think it's very important, like people like Q-Tip, Ferris One, LL Cool J, many of whom have already started making sure hip hop, the history of where it came from, what it means to the community, how it developed, what it means, is taught and shared with future generations. There have been too many artists who've entered hip hop and have attempted just to make money off of it and take advantage of it as much. And this has happened in black music since the beginning of time. Elvis Presley did it more successfully than anyone else. The Beatles did it. The Rolling Stones did it. Without giving respect and honor to the black rhythm and blues people who created that music, they made it seem as if it were something else. Right. Chuck Berry never gets, you know, people always say, oh, when he died, oh, Chuck Berry, he was the father of rock and roll. People say that, but it's really not understood. We say that, we give lip service to that, but in the next sentence, we'll still say Elvis Presley is the king of rock and roll. Mm-hmm. When Little Richard died, the same thing. Oh, he was one of the fathers, the founders, but yet it's still Elvis's music. Right. When Elvis openly stole black music, I mean, they didn't even hide it back then. It was like, we're taking this music and we're going to put a white face on it and sell it. Hip hop has done the same thing in many instances where individuals come in, and I'm not saying that non-blacks can't rap or come in and partake of the hip hop community. Mm-hmm. What I am saying is respect the culture that you're entering into, understand it, and show that appreciation through understanding the history and knowing what came before you. And that's why I'm like, you know, all applause to people like Q-Tip, Karis One, LL, Chuck D, who are making sure that history is understood and taught at schools across, you know, major universities. So that is very important that young people can know that, hey, this is where it came from. This is how it came into being. And you are joining this culture of dance, music, art, this hip hop culture. So yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think actually that is the answer, to put it into my words. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that like the direct answer to my question would be that you don't lose the edge. If it becomes commercialized, for instance, you don't lose the edge as long as you're staying truthful and honest to the roots and where it came from. And I know that that's one of the things that when you're working in education, that's always so important to you that you should try to pass on is don't forget your roots. Don't forget where you came from. And whether it be the history of slavery from your ancestors or in this case, music, you know, if you're going to jump into the art form of hip hop, make sure you know whether you're being taught it or not in school, you know, out of respect, you should know where it came from. You know, I always tell people, make sure you know the rules before you break the rules, and then you can break it. But I think that's how we avoid, hopefully, maybe losing that raw edge if there is an understanding of where it came from, basically. Would you agree with that?
Oh man, and of course. It's something that it's so important that you're able to hear and understand the source of what you are doing. Why is this? How did this come about? Why did it come about? So when you hear a song, when you hear something performed, you can understand the different sounds and different voices and the different meaning. For instance, America the Beautiful. I'm sure we all know the song. If you hear the usual performance of that song by the traditional white person performing it, as I've heard it many times, and then you hear Ray Charles sing America the Beautiful, there's nothing exemplifies the difference of who we are as a black people in a black community when you hear Ray Charles sing that song and you hear someone else, a white person, sing that song. If you've heard Ray Charles sing it, he sings it with something in there, you know, you hear the pain and the journey of black people in America. You hear it, and it's why it's the most, I mean, what's very interesting, it's the most performed version of the song. His specific version of that is the most played version of the song. When he goes off cusp, he improvises with black language and makes the song with very small changes with how he says the words, the small words he changes. He makes that song something so different that it amazes anyone who hears it. And any black person who hears it, I know what they hear, because the first time I heard him sing it, I was just like, wow. And I was a kid, and I was just like, that's something I would hear in church. That is something that speaks to the stories my grandma and grandpa and parents told me about Jim Crow. Hearing that song it's like the same song sung by two different people, and one has an entirely different meaning. Yeah. So anyone who could ever, America the Beautiful by Ray Charles, listen to that song, but first listen to it by, your traditional white performer, and you will hear the difference. The same song, the exact same song sung by two different people, and one has a meaning that is unmistakably black.
Nice.
And it's something that's so beautiful that I've always used that as the exemplar of this is black music, this is the black journey and it's right here, the same song talking about the same country, and it's very different. It's very different in its meaning, just by simply its performance.
Mm-hmm. And I think the reason for that is because of the authenticity and honesty in the performance, and it doesn't, from like Ray Charles, right?
Yeah.
And so it does, and he's such a great performer anyways, but it's so, in many ways, it's like channeled this kind, this authenticity, which is definitely in white performers, but I do see that kind of raw that I'm talking about, a lot in black music, which kind of brings me to another quote I want to share with you. And actually, I kind of rediscovered this quote recently in a word of the day that I do, on Instagram. And I did this at least 1 year ago. It might have even been 2 years ago. And the point I was trying to make was about staying in the moment, because I think that's also the answer to keeping it real and keeping it raw with, so that we don't lose that authenticity of where it came from. Is part of that is just being able to stay in the moment and grounded and honest to what you are. Because I think that's what we're trying to capture. As opposed to recreating the original sounds. Like, for instance, Ray Charles is a perfect example, because he was able to take a song that was not his, but he was able to put himself into it so much. And I think part of that is, in my work, I talk about staying in the moment. And when you are truly grounded, you are able to express yourself. And music is obvious in an authentic way. And music is obviously a great way to do that. So anyways, the quote is, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. This is also obviously really relevant to what is going on right now. It's by the quote is from Rabbi Tarfon from the year he died in the year 135 AD or C Common Era. They keep changing that. I don't remember, but it's after AD. Anyways, he was a Mishnah sage, and just to connect. Yeah, go ahead.
So connected to, what we see right now going on with Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter has taken up the baton from the civil rights movement. Right. They have accepted their responsibility. I should say we, because I'm a part of it. We have accepted the responsibility of continuing the work of Dr. King, Baynard Ruskin, and all the other great Black leaders that came before us, and saying, you know what? It's time for us to take up this banner and walk with it. And it's the same thing with music. Exactly. The exact same thing that Nina Simone, you can draw a direct line from Nina Simone to Tina Turner to Janet Jackson to Beyonce. Mm-hmm. You can draw a direct line from Ray Charles to Stevie Wonder to John Legend. You can draw the lines and see how these individuals said, you know what? I accept not just am I going to make music or to march or to sing I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it to benefit my community and to transform the world. So,
in honor of, even.
Yeah. And you see it right now in J. Cole. You see it in Kendrick Lamar. You hear Kendrick Lamar. I've heard Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole's music literally almost all day every time I go to a protest, because their hip hop is so relevant to young people. It's like they're like, these are our anthems. This is the soundtrack to our 2020 walk. Just like Motown was the music playing in the 60s, right now it's hip hop. There are some songs that are timeless. When you hear We Shall Overcome, no one has to tell anyone on this planet what that song means to the specific community that's playing it. We all understand We Shall Overcome. We know what that song is. We know what that means. And kids today who are playing Fight the Power or I'm Gonna Be All Right by Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole's music, that music to them is going to have that same meaning 40 years from now. Kids will know, like, we hear Kendrick Lamar, that's when they were marching and protesting police brutality and trying to transform the community to be safer and more equality and more just. So every generation has to accept the baton, the mantle of, we will move forward. We will do that which is supposed to have been done in our society by those individuals in power. And we will command them to do that. So it's something that's just incredible to see it over a period of time, how that's done in music, how that's done during the protest, and how they're linked together hand in hand. I love that.
Yeah, nice. And I also like that it says that
when you think of the countries that we come,
watch that. He says you are not obligated to complete the work, but you are neither free to abandon it. And I also really like that because there's, right now people are already talking about concerns of the whole movement blowing over, and, and we want change, we want to see change. But I also think it's really important to remember that change takes time. And right now, especially what we're asking for, or what the movement is asking for, certainly Black people are asking for, is institutional change, like big radical change. That doesn't happen overnight. It's great that they're making these changes in the police forces, and they're changing funding, and they're instilling rules, and that's great. But that doesn't mean the work is over.
No, and I think the dedication is part of accepting that. Part of that responsibility is dedicating yourself to. Right. I'm going to make sure change happens, and I'm dedicated to the change. I'm dedicated to this work every single day. This is not part-time work. This is not something you can do on the weekends. This is something that is a life dedication, because the only way things will be transformed is if you are dedicated to doing this work every single day. Every single day. That's how our parents, my parents, and that generation before me did it. It was like, we are dedicated to making the world more just, more equal. So, yeah, I'm glad. And just like we have to be dedicated to that in our work, whatever work we're doing, musicians. Stevie Wonder was dedicated to that work. He's like, I'm going to put that in my music.
Right.
So I know yesterday we didn't have a chance to talk, but yesterday was Prince's birthday. So,
oh, right. Happy birthday, Prince.
Happy 62nd birthday to his royal purpleness up there in heaven looking down on us. You know, once he hits music, Sign of the Times, my favorite Prince album. Once again, music that speaks to what was going on and how America needed to transform itself. So, yeah, Prince, happy belated birthday, June 7th, 1958.
Nice.
Purple.
Yeah. And for the artists who are taking up, I mean, this goes for any art form, really, but specifically right now we're talking about Black music and Black Music Appreciation Month, that if you are going to take up the art form, know its history and know that you are carrying a baton. And it is a responsibility as well to at least know that, to know it and respect it.
Definitely. I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to talk. This is really important because I really wanted to talk about Black music and its importance on every movement we've had. If it becomes abolition, the spirituals during the abolitionist movement, during civil rights movement, the music from Motown and the gospel music of that period, the movement right now, and the hip hop and other soul stars. It's all interconnected, that music was part of the resistance. All music sacred to underscore what change we needed to do. So, yeah, I really appreciate the fact that you invited me back on again.
Yeah,
to talk about this.
Yeah, well, I hope, this is not the end, but I do want to wrap up this conversation, and I want to return to what we kind of were talking about last week, this concept briefly. We don't have to go on forever, but about this idea of we are one, because I know right now there's a lot of criticism in the movement of people who are saying, well, all lives matter. And in all fairness, a lot of people who are saying all lives matter are racists, so I'll just acknowledge that, but I see a very clear difference. And I know we didn't 100% agree on this concept of we are one, but I wanted to return to it. And I was curious if you at least, even without giving in 100% to the idea, do you see the difference between we are one and all lives matter?
There's a definite difference that we are one and all lives matter. There's a definite difference. But for we are one, the reason why when people say that we are one, and why I push back against that, and why that's a dangerous concept at the moment. Yes, in the utopian sense of the word, yes, we are all one. Right. But that's our goal. That utopia is our goal. Right. We are not there yet. So when people push that as a phrase or a rallying cry, that is dangerous because it has a tendency to leave us, to not allow us to analyze what's going on at the current moment. If we were one, some of the problems would not exist. If we were all one, my pain for centuries, you would have felt my pain. And so the fact that others have not felt the pain that blacks have been crying out about since 1619, that's the danger when people say we are all one. Yes, the goal is for all of us to become one.
Right.
To join together in the city on the hill and unite hand in hand and be one. But the journey to that, right now, we are fractured. We are not, equality does not exist. Justice does not exist for all of us. So therefore, on our journey during this fight, when people shout, we are one, I would respond, our goal is for us to be one, to be equal, to all have justice, yes, but we're not there yet. So using that as a rally cry or saying that is the case at this moment is dangerous because it has a tendency to make people believe that something exists that does not exist currently, which means equality, justice for everyone. That doesn't exist right now. So yes, the goal is for us to be one, but we aren't there yet. So let's look for the goal.
I 100% agree with that. And I do think first of all, I don't use it as a rallying cry, but which I want to make clear because it is an important part of my book. But I 100% agree with you. And I also agree it's not totally appropriate. It's not appropriate to be using it as a rallying cry. And I do think it is a message that gets usurped by racists, and I also agree with you that we are not there yet. And it's not necessarily, it's dangerous. It's a slippery slope to say, let's focus on being one before we have made the changes that we need that the Black Lives Matter movement is kind of asking for. So I'm totally on the same page with you on that. So awesome. Thank you for having the conversation with me.
Always. It's amazing to have a conversation with you. I tell everyone, please go listen to Ray Charles, America the Beautiful. I think that song, listen to both versions. Listen to a version by someone or anyone white or a choir, and then listen to Uncle Ray sing it. And I think that is such an amazing example of how two groups can feel about or see America.
I'll post links in the underneath in the description so people can follow that. So thank you again for your time, your input, your thoughts, your energy. And I think that's it. Anything else?
Live long and prosper.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.